Well, now I know why Walter White was so gung-ho about getting a fly out of his lab. It's showtime, folks. So, directed by David Cronenberg, who has become known for his work and his help in developing the subgenre of horror film known as body horror, we have this film called The Fly. With this type of horror, there is a very visceral transformation that happens between most of the characters. And one of the most prime examples of David Cronenberg's work is 1986's The Fly. So, 1986's The Fly stars Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle, Gena Davis as his love interest, Veronica, and John Getz as Veronica's former love interest and editor, going by the name of Stathis. So this film revolves primarily around the relationship between Seth and Veronica and the slow spiral of Seth's ambition leading to the transformation into the titular Fly. This film was released in 1986 and it was a remake to a 1958 film of the same name. And that film was based off of a short story released in 1957. At the time of the film's release, this film was met with very positive critical reception, and off of a 9 to 15 million, I couldn't get a concrete number on it, $9 to $15 million budget, this film grossed a reported $60.6 million haul at the box office upon release. So it was a success at the time it came out, and I could totally see why. So just so everybody knows, this is going to be a spoiler-filled talk, as this movie's been out now for about 30 years. So this is going to be our first spoiler talk, guys, on Chuco's Powerhouse Cinema. But I mean, if you've not seen The Fly and you want to go in fresh, or you want to go in without knowing anything about it, I totally understand. Click off this video, go watch the movie, and then come back and check it out and see what I think about it. I always recommend that. Chuco always recommends going out and watch the movie for yourself before you listen to what I have to say about it. But if not, this is your spoiler alert. If you're ready to stick around though, let's get ready to fly through this story and get down to the nitty-gritty of it all. So again, spoiler alert is in order. So, The Fly is actually the first request I've received from one of you guys. So I'm really excited to get a request, and even more excited that I was asked to review a classic. And I'll be completely honest with you guys. This was a first time watch for me. I know, it's a classic. And over the years, I had caught a few glimpses of this movie, you know, a piece of it here, a piece of it there, a scene here, a scene there. I'd heard all the praise that goes into The Fly. But I even remember as a kid hearing my mom say stuff about The Fly and how she was unable to sit through it and how it was really, really gross, and that she could only watch it one time. And that really set an expectation in my mind as a kid, but I just never really got around to watching it, I guess. It was just one of those things that always escaped good old Chuco's watch list. And even if it was there, I just never really got around to watching it. So this was a first time watch, and I had this really, really big hype built into watching this movie. And it was just because of all the things I'd heard about it and all the, you know, all the rumors, all the murmurs of what to expect about this. So getting into a little bit of the history of The Fly, like I said in the opening, this film is actually a remake of a film by the same name. It is perfectly casted, I think, with the two leads being Jeff Goldblum playing the character of Seth and Gena Davis playing his love interest Veronica. Getting into some elements of the story, we follow this brilliant scientist named Seth who meets Veronica at a social event. It's like a party with all these scientists, and Veronica's trying to interview different scientists and kind of get a grasp of her next big story, because I think she's like a reporter. Seth tries to woo her with this scientific creation that he has that allows him to teleport certain types of matter. At the start of the story, Seth is starting to be able to teleport inanimate objects. So he's just like things that are not living, he's able to teleport. And when he tries to woo Veronica, Seth takes her to his apartment and shows her his new invention. He doesn't know she's a reporter at the time, and he shows her everything. With that, Veronica tries to write a story about his success, because this is something that is unheard of and that could actually change the world as they describe it. When Veronica reveals that she wants to write a story on this, or she wants to take this to an editor, Seth asks her to refrain from doing so because up to this point, he's been able to operate without much attention from his funders, and he's been able to kind of operate freely. You know, he's been able to like experiment as he wants to, and he's really trying to be able to teleport living things. He doesn't want to just be able to teleport just non-living items. He wants to be known for being the first to teleport living things without having anybody intervene with his research. He wants to be the one that does this without any help. It's this ambition that leads him to the events of this story. Soon after Seth and Veronica kind of share this moment in his apartment, they begin a romantic relationship. It's pretty quick in the movie, and they decide to Marvin Gaye and get it on, you know what I mean? Like they really just jump right into it, which is important because the character dynamics continue to grow off of this relationship that they begin to establish right at the beginning of the film. Unfortunately for the two of them, this relationship doesn't last that long though, because Veronica's ex and her current editor eventually finds out about this romantic relationship that's going on between Seth and Veronica, and threatens to publish the story that Veronica had initially written and asked not to publish about Seth's work. When Veronica has left to go talk to Stathis, her ex, Seth believes that she's going to rekindle some kind of relationship with them. And this leads to him kind of taking further steps to teleport something living. He's just trying his best to stand out and, you know, just to be the guy that she falls for. And this ends up leading to the point in the film where after Sammy successfully teleporting a living thing, Seth decides to teleport himself from one port that he has created to another. But when Seth teleports himself, there is an issue that goes on when a common housefly gets into this little pod with him. And during the teleportation process, their genes are spliced together, leading to the events of the film. Now, just starting with some of the things I love about this film, one of them is the cast. Now, Jeff Goldblum and Gena Davis as our two leads are perfectly cast, and they share an exceptional chemistry on screen. This is probably because the two were dating at the time this movie was filmed. Funny enough, I was reading up on the movie. Yeah, I did a little bit of research. Initially, the powers that be didn't even want Jeff Goldblum to be the star of this film. They were looking at different names. Names such as John Malkovich, John Lithgow, and Michael Keaton were all considered for the role of Seth, just because they were a little bit more bankable at the time. Jeff Goldblum was eventually cast in this film because of his willingness to wear the prosthetics and the makeup that go into this film, which is heavy amounts. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But that is one of the key reasons why Jeff Goldblum ended up being cast in this film. The powers that be were reluctant to cast Gena Davis in this film. They considered other actresses before ultimately allowing Gena Davis to take part in this role. And this turned out to be an excellent choice. First, Jeff Goldblum is phenomenal in this role, with his turn as Seth becoming an iconic part of film history. Jeff Goldblum is able to capture the ambitious yet somewhat socially awkward scientist very, very well. Like, there was parts of this film where I just was kind of watching him, and you really see that transformation. You really see a man that is really sure of himself as his capabilities go. He's got this confidence to him, but he also is a little bit socially awkward. He stands out from everybody else because of his intelligence. You know what I mean? So Jeff Goldblum does that very, very well. You see him right at the start when he's trying to woo Veronica, Gena Davis's character. You see that confidence, you see that charisma that Jeff Goldblum brings, but you also see as the movie progresses, those little socially awkward tidbits that go along with his character, and Jeff Goldblum captures that very, very well. He has this charisma about him that we've all come to know and love about Jeff Goldblum that makes you root for the character, you know? It makes you root for Seth in his goals, you know what I mean? And he becomes the protagonist of the movie initially. Yet, as the movie progresses, Jeff Goldblum is able to capture the animalistic nature of what's happening to him. This ambition that you rooted for at the beginning of the film begins to turn into this ambition that is just downright evil. It's animalistic in nature, and it's literally Jeff Goldblum transforming into a monster. Literally a monster. Along with Goldblum, Gena Davis, whose turn as Veronica is phenomenal. It is exceptional work on Gena Davis's part. She's a convincing love interest to Seth, which makes a lot of sense considering the relationship between Jeff Goldblum and Gena Davis at the time. And someone you want to see make through this film. You know, I think something that's been lost on a lot of movies, especially horror movies in general, in recent years, is you don't really care about some of the survivors, at least in recent films, you know what I mean? You don't really build a bond with the characters, and so you don't really care if they make it or not. This is not the case with The Fly, with Gena Davis's character. You want her to make it. You want her to survive the situation that she's in, because she is a character that's just caught in the crossfire. Initially, she is just this reporter that, you know, is kind of falling for Seth. And as the movie progresses, you see someone who genuinely loves this person, watching as the man that she cares about is completely transforming into this revolting, animalistic version of himself that she just can't help. She can't help him, and she doesn't know how to help him. She wants to help him, but she doesn't know how to help him, and she simply can't help him because of the situation that he finds himself in. And you believe that. Gena Davis is able to capture all the emotion necessary to depict the initial admiration she has for Seth's ambition that ultimately becomes horror at what Seth becomes. I even enjoy John Getz as Stathis. He's able to play this really crappy dude. Honestly, like, just Stathis is not a great guy at the beginning of this film, especially the way he treats Gena Davis, the way he tries to manipulate the situation, the way he tries to manipulate her. He is not a great guy. But that means that John Getz is a great actor, because you don't like this guy at all. At least I didn't. Right out the gate, I was just like, who the heck is this guy? Screw this guy. I don't know, what is this guy doing? Why is he talking to Gena Davis this way? I just don't like him. He's a crappy guy, and he plays the part well. And you hate him initially. Like I said, you hate him initially, and you just don't want, you don't want to see him succeed. You're like, hey, leave Seth alone. Leave Veronica alone. Leave Seth alone. And you don't like the way that Stathis is clinging to Veronica, despite her seeming disgust with him at this point. Like, you just don't like seeing it. But then as the movie progresses, you see Stathis turn into the guy that is trying to save her. You see him turn from this unlikable character to the guy that is trying to save her from the monster that has come to life, you know? And so that's interesting to see. And that's something that I admire about this film. You actually see the changing dynamic in all these characters that I can't picture other actors being able to capture in such a believable way. Something else that I enjoy, and it is likely one of those things that could go without being said, but I'll say it anyway, is the use of practical effects and makeup in this film. Guys, this film won the Academy Award for Best Makeup. This is a horror movie, mind you. A horror movie that won the Academy Award for Best Makeup. I don't know how many of you follow the Academy Awards, but the Academy is known not to exactly favor horror movies. I don't even think they really pay them that much attention, especially at the time. I'm sure they didn't. And for this film to win Best Makeup, that speaks volumes about what was going on in this movie. Chris Wales and Stephen Dupuis. Sorry, Stephen. You're still a man. Completely transformed Seth from this scientist to this humanoid version of man and fly. And they do it progressively. It's not just like from one scene to the next. There's just this progression, and the makeup continues to change. This monster, or the fly, is something that you just can't look away from, no matter how grotesque it appears to be on the screen. This is something that you're watching happen, that you're shaking your head at how it looks, but you can't look away. And that is something that I love about this movie. Even more so, you just believe everything that is going on in this film. Sure, there are certain aspects of this film that haven't aged quite well, particularly the computers. I mean, guys, it was the 80s. The computers aren't exactly what we would see today, but still, this movie is not only watchable, but enjoyable in, modern times. I mean, just looking back and seeing what the computers were like, okay, maybe, but this is still a timeless movie because of the practical effects, because of the way this movie is shot. It becomes timeless. Other than, dating itself because of technology at the time. Other than that, I mean, this movie has become timeless because of the style choices at the time this movie was filmed. And that's something that should go mentioned and should always be referred to when talking about The Fly. I think this is something that was excellent, and I still can't get over it. Even if I recently saw it, I can't get over it. I just can't get over how good this movie looks and how horrific that transformation is from man to humanoid to just whatever the fly is. Further, a lot of this film has underlying themes, which is something you don't see a lot of in modern horror movies, or movies in general, I guess. See, The Fly is not really a horror movie, in my opinion, or in the modern sense of the word, a horror movie. I wouldn't put this movie in the same category as slashers or possession films, like things like The Exorcist or anything like that. But what makes The Fly so horrific is truly the transformation of the characters that we see in this film. See a man that we're rooting for begin to transform into this monster of a being. It's something we pity at first as a viewer, but then want to see destroyed for what it is. A lot of what we see has messages, tied into terminal diseases, with some viewers at the time thinking that it had something to do with the AIDS epidemic that was going on. Further, we see this film tackle heavy themes such as reproductive rights and the pressure associated with those decisions being made. It's not heavily discussed, but it is portrayed in the film, and there's really heavy themes that make you think about these things. And that's something that is interesting about The Fly, is these deeper themes that you don't see in modern horror movies. Further, we see these character dynamics switch. I mean, you go from hating Stathis, for example, which is Veronica's ex. You go from hating this guy, at least I did, to rooting for him because he's trying to save her from Jeff Goldblum's character, who we started by liking and ended up really, really disliking. At least I did. I mean, I went from pitying the guy to being like, dude, what are you doing? Until ultimately you're rooting, the roles are reversed and you're rooting for this guy to stop Seth. So this movie is just chock full of heavy themes and very dynamic character study when it comes to each of the individual leads. The whole thing is just a very interesting view at what we perceive as good and evil. But ultimately what this film does well is to horrify. I mean, if we're gonna call it a horror movie, it does that. It horrifies the viewer based off of everything that goes on in the movie. And I guess that's why it's categorized as body horror. There was no jump scares, really. There's nothing like these horror themes that you've come to know, especially in modern horror movies. That's not quite on that level, but it horrifies. And that is something that is missing in modern horror movies, I think, a lot of the time. So The Fly is a very good movie that horrifies. Do I consider it horror? I mean, that's the genre in which it's categorized, but it's not a horror movie in the sense that it's scary. It's a horror movie in the sense that it does that. It horrifies the viewer, and that is exceptional. Ultimately, it's really hard for me to express how good I found this film to be. I was excited to watch it. I finally got around to watching it, and now I know why it's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. The score by Howard Shore is exceptional and ties into the horrific nature of this film, and it's very poignant. I also found myself attached to both Seth and Veronica as the film earned that connection from the audience. Like I said earlier, oftentimes in horror movies, you're just kind of waiting for the slasher to do its thing or for the spooky things to happen. But what this film does is it really draws you to be connected to these characters, and it earns that. It earns me wanting to see Gena Davis make it, or to see Seth, after his fall from grace, be destroyed. Now, getting into the rating of this film, The Fly is an easy, and I mean easy, 4.5 out of 5. Are you not entertained? It is an amazing feat for its time. This movie is extremely influential to film that we know today, to film as we know it today, particularly in the body horror category. And there are strong performances in this film, particularly from Gena Davis and from Jeff Goldblum. This film is enjoyable for both the common horror viewer, you know, just the person that wants to sit down and watch something that's considered a horror movie, and somebody that just wants to watch a cool movie. And also for those who search for deeper meaning, who want to explore deeper elements in film, this movie is enjoyable for that. I also find a lot of rewatchability value in this film. I mean, I know personally I'm excited to rewatch it and just keep digging and see what I enjoy of this film. I even went as far as to try to find the short story, the original short story, but unfortunately to no avail. Overall, I think this film has earned its position as a classic in cinema. And yeah, 4.5 out of 5, very, very easily from me. I sat there and watched it, and it's one of those movies that you sit and you think about everything that went into it after you're done watching it. And that's just something that, you know, is always good. And that's just something that I always enjoy from a good movie, is just sitting there and contemplating about all the things that went into making this film. But what did you guys think about The Fly? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Disagree with what I'm saying? Leave your thoughts and your comments down below. If you're new to the channel, I would really appreciate if you like and share this video. Or if you want to see more from good old Chuco, just subscribe. It means a lot, and I appreciate all your support. Still, if you consider subscribing, always remember something my friend Seth used to tell me, and that's